Mark had always been a meticulous man. As a graphic designer, he thrived on structure, precision, and clarity, but his life after his first divorce had been anything but. It was a tumultuous period, marked by long nights spent questioning his choices. Then, at an art gallery opening, he met Vivian. She breezed into his life like a whirlwind, her wild curls framing a face that seemed to glow with adventure. A photographer with a passion for the world, Vivian was everything Mark had been missing. A spark, a challenge, a reason to look forward to tomorrow. They fell fast and hard. Vivian saw in Mark a steadiness she craved, a counterbalance to her own chaotic energy. He, in turn, was captivated by her insatiable curiosity. Within months, they were inseparable, embarking on weekend road trips, sneaking into abandoned buildings for photo shoots, and dreaming of a future filled with creativity and connection. Their wedding was small but heartfelt, a ceremony on a windswept beach with only their closest friends and family. The honeymoon phase faded quickly as reality set in. Mark had left his job at a prestigious design agency to start his own freelance business. While the move was freeing, it also left them financially strapped. Vivian, though immensely talented, struggled to find consistent work. The bills piled up, and arguments became a regular part of their lives. Mark resented Vivian's carefree attitude toward money, while she chafed under his constant anxiety about their future. Despite the tension, they persevered. Mark landed a few significant clients, including a tech startup that valued his innovative designs, and Vivian secured a contract with a travel magazine that sent her on assignments across the globe. They finally moved out of their cramped apartment into a slightly larger place with enough room for Vivian's sprawling collection of cameras and Mark's ever-expanding workspace. Life seemed to be settling into a comfortable rhythm. One evening, as Mark worked late on a project, he noticed Vivian's laptop glowing on the kitchen table. It was open to an email conversation with someone named Alex. The messages were casual on the surface but carried an undercurrent of something more. Mark's stomach twisted. When he asked Vivian about it, she laughed it off, calling Alex a harmless colleague. But doubt began to gnaw at him. Weeks turned into months, and Vivian's assignments grew more frequent. Mark told himself he was being paranoid, but then came the call. An unfamiliar number flashed on his phone, and when he answered, a man introduced himself as Alex. His voice was calm, even apologetic, as he revealed that he and Vivian had been seeing each other for a year. He claimed she had promised to leave Mark but couldn't bring herself to do it. Mark felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. When he confronted Vivian, she denied it vehemently, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. One night, driven by a desperate need for answers, he searched through Vivian's camera. Among her stunning photographs of landscapes and city streets, he found a series of intimate images, Vivian and Alex, laughing, embracing, and kissing. His confrontation with her was explosive. She broke down, admitting to the affair but insisting it had ended months ago. She blamed her actions on their early financial struggles and her fear of losing herself in a life of routine and responsibility. Mark didn't know what to believe. He was furious, heartbroken, and confused all at once. As if the affair wasn't enough, a letter arrived a week later, addressed to both of them. It was from Alex, claiming that Vivian had used him to fund her projects, promising a future that never materialized. He threatened legal action, accusing her of manipulation and deceit. The letter sent their already strained relationship into freefall. Vivian tried to explain, saying she had been caught in a web of her own making, but Mark felt like he didn't know the woman he had married. They tried therapy, not to save the marriage but to make sense of what had happened. In those sessions, Mark confessed that he had been so consumed by building his career that he had neglected their relationship. Vivian admitted that she had sought in Alex the excitement she felt was missing from her life with Mark. The sessions were raw and painful, filled with accusations, apologies, and moments of brutal honesty. Mark stood in their living room one evening, staring at a photo of the two of them from their wedding day. He wondered if that version of themselves still existed somewhere or if they had been replaced by two strangers. The decision to stay or leave loomed over them, an unspoken question they both felt but couldn't yet answer. Their lives, once so entwined, now hung in the balance, uncertain and forever changed. It started as small things, little inconsistencies that I told myself didn't mean anything. Vivian had always been a free spirit, and her work as a photographer often meant odd hours and unpredictable schedules. But lately, her behavior had shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. She began coming home later than usual from shoots, her explanations vague and hurried. "The light was just perfect," she'd say, or, "I got caught up reviewing the shots." It wasn't that she hadn't worked late before, but there was something different in the way she spoke about it. Nervous. Almost rehearsed. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. After everything we had been through, scraping by when we could barely make rent, celebrating our small victories when her magazine picked up a piece, or when I landed a big client, I didn't want to think that something could be wrong. We had weathered so many storms together. Why would she jeopardize that now? The first real jolt of suspicion came one evening when she returned from a shoot unusually flustered. Her hair was disheveled, and there was a faint streak of something on her blouse. Mud, maybe? I asked her how it went, trying to keep my tone casual, and she launched into an overly detailed explanation about how the location had been more challenging than expected. Her words tumbled over each other, a stark contrast to her usual composed self. I noticed she wasn't meeting my eyes, and when I tried to joke about her looking like she had wrestled a bear, she barely managed a chuckle before retreating to the bathroom. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the shower running. Something was off. I could feel it, a quiet shift in the atmosphere between us, like the subtle pull of a riptide beneath the surface. But I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Around the same time, Jake began acting strangely too. He and I had been best friends for over a decade, long before Vivian entered the picture. Jake was the guy I called when I needed to vent about work, the one who had helped me land some of my first freelance gigs through his connections. He was practically family, and Vivian adored him. They had always gotten along well, maybe a little too well, I thought now, the idea striking me like a cold slap. Jake had been distant lately, canceling plans at the last minute and dodging my calls with flimsy excuses. When I finally cornered him at a coffee shop one afternoon, his discomfort was palpable. He fidgeted with his cup, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. "Everything okay, man?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "You've been pretty MA lately." "Yeah, just busy," he replied quickly. Too quickly. "Work's been a nightmare, you know how it is." I nodded, but I didn't buy it. Jake had never been one to shy away from talking about his work stresses, and his vague response only heightened my unease. I tried to push the thought aside, chalking it up to my own paranoia, but it lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. Vivian's behavior continued to raise red flags. She started guarding her phone more closely, a new habit that didn't escape my notice. She used to leave it lying around the house, her trust in me implicit, but now it seemed to be glued to her side. One evening, I caught her quickly swiping away a notification as I walked into the room. She smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Just work stuff," she replied, slipping the phone into her pocket. "Nothing interesting." It wasn't the answer that bothered me, it was the way she said it. The forced nonchalance. The slight hitch in her voice. I started paying closer attention, trying to piece together the puzzle without tipping her off. I didn't want to accuse her of anything without proof, but the doubts were eating me alive. One day, while cleaning the living room, I came across a crumpled receipt tucked between the couch cushions. It was from a restaurant we never went to, dated from a night Vivian had claimed to be on a shoot. My chest tightened as I stared at it, the implications sinking in. Who had she been with? I considered confronting her right then and there but hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if this was all some misunderstanding? The last thing I wanted was to throw accusations at her and risk damaging our already strained relationship. Jake's odd behavior only added to my growing paranoia. When I tried to bring up Vivian in conversation, his responses were curt and evasive. "How's she doing?" I asked one evening over a drink. "She's fine, I guess," he said, not meeting my gaze. "Why?" "Just curious." "She's been pretty busy with work." "Yeah," he muttered, taking a long sip of his beer. "Guess so." His discomfort was obvious, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or something else. Was I imagining things, or was there something he wasn't telling me? The thought gnawed at me, turning over and over in my mind like a stone in a tumbler. One night, I decided to follow Vivian. She had mentioned a last-minute shoot and left the house in a rush, barely stopping to say goodbye. I waited a few minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out. My heart pounded as I trailed her car, keeping a safe distance. She drove across town to a hotel, pulling into the parking lot and heading inside without a second glance. I sat in my car, staring at the hotel entrance, a sinking feeling in my gut. Every rational part of me screamed to turn around, to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I couldn't. Not this time. My hands trembled as I stepped out of the car and walked toward the lobby. I didn't see her inside, but the front desk clerk gave me a curious look as I lingered near the elevators. I felt like a fool, standing there, unsure of what to do next. Just as I was about to leave, the elevator doors opened, and there she was, walking out with Jake. They didn't see me at first. They were talking in hushed tones, their heads close together. Then Jake glanced up and froze. Vivian turned, her face draining of color when she saw me. For a moment, the three of us stood there in stunned silence, the weight of the situation crashing down like a tidal wave. What the hell is going on? I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Vivian opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jake looked away, his jaw tight, his expression a mixture of guilt and shame. My worst fears had been confirmed, and there was no going back. The night I caught Vivian and Jake at the hotel felt like the world had tipped on its axis. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, it was the sheer magnitude of it. My wife and my best friend, two of the most important people in my life, had crossed a line I could barely comprehend. But in that moment, I didn't want to yell or demand answers. I wanted the truth, cold and unvarnished. And I knew I wouldn't get it from them. Vivian returned home that night, but we didn't speak. She went to bed silently, and I stayed up, sitting in the dark with a drink in my hand, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Jake had texted me once, a pathetic, one-line apology that I deleted without reading twice. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It felt calculated, deliberate, like they had been tiptoeing around me while living a secret life. The next morning, I reached out to Leah, Jake's longtime partner. Leah and I weren't particularly close, but we'd shared enough double dates and holidays to develop a friendly rapport. When I called, I didn't mince words. Leah, I began, my voice heavy with exhaustion, I think there's something going on between Jake and Vivian. I need to know if you've noticed anything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Leah sighed. I've been feeling like something's off for months, she admitted. But I thought it was just in my head. Jake's been distant, working late, making excuses. And lately he's been guarding his phone like it's the nuclear codes. I could hear the hurt in her voice, and it mirrored my own. I need your help, I said. If there's proof, we have to find it. Leah agreed without hesitation. She was furious and heartbroken, and she wanted answers as much as I did. We met the following day at a cafe, sitting in a corner booth like conspirators in a spy novel. I brought everything I had, the receipt from the unknown restaurant, the strange behavior I'd noticed, and the memory of their hushed conversation at the hotel. Leah added her own observations. Jake's sudden, uncharacteristic interest in photography, his frequent absences, and the suspicious texts she'd glimpsed before he quickly hid his phone. As we talked, a thought occurred to me. Vivian's sister, Alice, might know something. Alice and Vivian had always been close, and if anyone could shed light on Vivian's actions, it would be her. I wasn't sure how to approach her, but Leah encouraged me. If she's half as upset as we are, she'll want the truth too. I reached out to Alice later that evening. She was surprised to hear from me, and when I told her what I suspected, she sounded horrified. Are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling. Vivian, she wouldn't, but she stopped herself, as if realizing she wasn't as confident in her sister's loyalty as she wanted to be. I'll help you, she said finally. If what you're saying is true, I need to know. The three of us, me, Leah, and Alice, became an unlikely team. We scoured every lead, piecing together the fragmented puzzle of Jake and Vivian's betrayal. Leah managed to access Jake's email one evening while he was showering, and what she found made her blood run cold. A series of exchanges with Vivian, some discussing logistics for meetings, others more intimate and damning. She forwarded everything to me, her hands shaking as she typed. Alice, meanwhile, confronted Vivian directly, under the guise of casual sisterly concern. "How's work been?" she asked during a coffee date. "You've seemed so stressed lately." Vivian brushed off the question, but Alice noticed the way she tensed, the way her eyes darted away. It wasn't much, but it confirmed what we already suspected: Vivian was hiding something. My own breakthrough came when I remembered Vivian's love for her camera. She often uploaded her photos to a cloud storage account, which she sometimes used on our shared laptop. One night, after she had gone to bed, I logged in using her saved credentials. What I found there confirmed my worst fears: photos of her and Jake, candid moments that spoke of an intimacy far beyond friendship. There were no explicit images, but they didn't need to be. The way they looked at each other, the way they laughed, it was all there, captured in perfect, damning clarity. I shared the photos with Leah and Alice the next day. Leah was livid, pacing back and forth as she muttered curses under her breath. Alice looked like she might cry. "I can't believe she did this," she whispered. "To you." Together, we decided to confront them. It wasn't enough to know the truth. They had to face the consequences of their actions. We arranged a meeting at my house, inviting both Jake and Vivian without telling them what it was about. They arrived separately, both looking confused and uneasy when they saw the three of us sitting there. "What's going on?" Vivian asked, her voice wary. "Sit down," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. Leah started. She pulled out the emails, laying them on the table like evidence in a courtroom. "Explain these," she said, her voice cold. Jake's face went pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Vivian looked at the papers, her expression shifting from confusion to panic. "Mark." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation for this." Alice, who had been silent until now, turned to Vivian. "How could you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You lied to all of us. You betrayed Mark, and you dragged Jake into it. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Vivian started crying then, her tears falling silently as she stared at the table. Jake looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Neither of them offered a defense, and in their silence, we found the confirmation we needed. I didn't feel satisfaction in that moment, only a hollow, aching sense of loss. The two people I had trusted most had shattered that trust irreparably. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: the life I thought I had was over. Now, all that was left was to decide what to do with the pieces. The decision to expose Jake and Vivian publicly wasn't made lightly. Leah and I agonized over it for days, weighing every possible outcome. But in the end, it wasn't just about vengeance, it was about holding them accountable. Both had lied to us, betrayed us, and carried on as though their actions had no consequences. I wasn't going to let them walk away without facing the truth, and neither was Leah. Jake's company was hosting a major corporate party, a semi-annual event known for its grandeur. It was the perfect setting: high-profile clients, senior executives, and most importantly, Jake himself, surrounded by the professional life he valued so dearly. Leah was the one who suggested it. "He cares more about his reputation at work than anything else," she said, her voice steely. "Let's see how he handles the fallout." We planned meticulously. Leah would attend the party as Jake's +1, while I would accompany her as her colleague. Vivian had mentioned she might join Jake at the event, so the chance of her being there was high. Alice, though reluctant to attend, helped us refine our approach, ensuring our presentation of the evidence was irrefutable. Between Leah's forward emails, my collection of photos, and Alice's testimony about Vivian's evasive behavior, we had more than enough. When the night arrived, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I wasn't a confrontational person by nature, but this wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. Dressed in a suit that felt a size too tight, I walked into the sleek downtown venue alongside Leah. The place was as opulent as expected: glittering chandeliers, soft jazz playing in the background, and a sea of polished professionals mingling with glasses of champagne. Jake was easy to spot, holding court near the bar with a group of colleagues. He looked every bit the successful sales manager, his laugh loud and confident. Vivian wasn't far, dressed to impress and chatting animatedly with a senior executive. Seeing them there, so at ease, stirred a rage in me I hadn't felt before. They were acting like they'd gotten away with it, like Leah and I didn't exist. Leah leaned toward me. "You ready?" she asked, her voice low but firm. I nodded. "Let's do this." Leah strode across the room, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She approached Jake with a smile that was as icy as it was forced. "Jake," she said sweetly, "mind introducing me to your team?" He turned, startled but masking it quickly. "Leah, hey. Everyone, this is my girlfriend, Leah." The group greeted her warmly, none the wiser to the storm brewing. Leah exchanged pleasantries for a few moments before turning to Jake. "Actually, Jake, there's something I'd like to share with everyone here. Mark, would you join us?" The shift in Jake's expression was immediate, a flicker of confusion, then unease, then outright panic as I approached with a laptop under my arm. "Leah, what's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. "Oh, just a little presentation," Leah replied, her tone saccharine. "It's something you and Vivian have been working on together, isn't it?" At that, Vivian, who had been standing a few feet away, froze. Her eyes darted between Leah and me, and she began to edge toward the exit. But it was too late. Leah opened the laptop and, with the help of one of Jake's unsuspecting colleagues, projected our evidence onto a large screen. The room fell silent as emails between Jake and Vivian appeared, their flirtatious tone unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the crowd when the photos came up. Vivian and Jake in intimate moments, their betrayal captured in vivid detail. A few of Jake's colleagues looked away, embarrassed. Others whispered furiously among themselves. Vivian clutched her purse, her face pale, while Jake stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, as though words had failed him. "For those of you wondering," Leah said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, "this is the man who has been cheating on me with his best friend's wife. And Vivian, in case anyone here doesn't know, is Mark's wife." All eyes turned to Vivian, who looked like she might collapse. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Jake, regaining some semblance of composure, stepped forward. "This isn't the place for—" "Oh, it's exactly the place," I interrupted, my voice loud and clear. "You've spent months lying to me, to Leah, and probably to everyone else here. You thought you could get away with it, but now everyone knows exactly who you are." The silence stretched uncomfortably before someone in the crowd muttered, "Unbelievable." A few others nodded in agreement. Jake's boss, a stern-looking man in his 60s, stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. "Jake, my office." "Now," he said through gritted teeth, then turned to Vivian. "You too, ma'am. I think you've both done enough damage for one evening." Vivian didn't move. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at me, silently pleading. I shook my head. There was nothing left to say. Jake followed his boss reluctantly, his shoulders slumped, while Vivian trailed behind him, her heels clicking unevenly against the floor. The party began to buzz with whispers and speculation as they disappeared into a side room. Leah and I stayed long enough to ensure the message had sunk in before leaving. Outside, the crisp night air felt like a balm on my frayed nerves. "You okay?" Leah asked, looking at me with a mix of concern and determination. I took a deep breath, the weight of the night settling over me. "Not really," I admitted. "But I'm glad we did it." Jake was fired the following week, a decision that came as no surprise given the scandal's impact on the company's reputation. Vivian's disgrace was more personal. Her reputation within our social and professional circles was in tatters. She moved out of our home shortly afterward, leaving behind a void I wasn't sure how to fill. As for Leah and me, we found some solace in each other's company, though it was bittersweet. We had both lost so much: trust, love, and the lives we thought we were building. But we had gained something too, the knowledge that we deserved better, and the strength to demand it. For now, that was enough. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a grim-faced courier who handed it to me with an expression that suggested he'd seen this kind of drama far too many times. I stood in the doorway of my now quiet home, staring at the papers in disbelief. Jake and Vivian were suing Leah and me for defamation. After everything they had done, they had the audacity to claim we had damaged their reputations. It would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. I called Leah immediately, and she was as stunned as I was. "They can't be serious," she said, her voice rising. "Defamation? After we showed the truth?" "They're serious enough to file," I replied, scanning the dense legal language. "They're claiming the public exposure at the party caused irreparable harm to their careers and reputations. Jake says he lost his job unfairly, and Vivian claims she's been blacklisted in the industry." Leah let out a bitter laugh. "They destroyed their own reputations, Mark. We didn't do that. They did." Despite our anger, we knew we couldn't take this lightly. A lawsuit, no matter how baseless, had the potential to spiral out of control. I reached out to a lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Rebecca who came highly recommended by a colleague. She listened patiently as I laid out the entire sordid story, from the first suspicions to the hotel confrontation, and finally, the corporate party. When I finished, Rebecca leaned back in her chair, a faint smile playing on her lips. "They don't have a case," she said confidently. "Defamation requires that what you said was false. From what you've shown me, you have mountains of evidence proving the affair. If they want to take this to court, they're only going to embarrass themselves further." That was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the nerves. The idea of standing in court, reliving every painful detail of the betrayal, was daunting. Still, Leah and I agreed to move forward. If Jake and Vivian wanted a fight, we were ready. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, its wood-paneled walls giving it an almost intimate feel. Jake and Vivian sat on one side, looking every bit the wronged parties they were pretending to be. Jake wore a sharp suit, his expression carefully neutral, while Vivian looked somber in a muted dress. I had to give them credit, they played the part well. Leah and I sat opposite them, flanked by Rebecca, who radiated calm confidence. As the proceedings began, Jake's lawyer painted a picture of two people whose lives had been unfairly ruined by a malicious and baseless public attack. He spoke of Jake's exemplary career, of Vivian's artistic contributions, and how our actions had cost them both their livelihoods. When it was Rebecca's turn, she didn't waste any time dismantling their narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, addressing the jury with a steady gaze, "the plaintiffs would have you believe they are victims of defamation. But defamation requires falsehoods, and the evidence we will present proves that everything my clients shared was the truth." She laid out our case methodically, presenting the emails Leah had forwarded, the photos from Vivian's cloud account, and even testimony from Alice, who recounted Vivian's evasive behavior and admitted suspicions. As each piece of evidence was introduced, I saw Jake and Vivian's composure begin to crack. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening, while Vivian's eyes darted nervously around the room. The most damning moment came when Rebecca called Leah to the stand. Leah recounted in vivid detail how she had discovered the emails, how Jake's behavior had grown increasingly suspicious, and how she had worked with me to uncover the truth. She spoke with a quiet dignity that made her words all the more powerful. When Rebecca presented the photographs, the jury's reaction was palpable. There was no denying the intimacy between Jake and Vivian in those images, the way they looked at each other, the way they touched. It was a betrayal captured in crystal-clear clarity, and no amount of legal posturing could explain it away. Jake's lawyer tried to argue that the evidence had been obtained improperly, that we had violated their privacy. But Rebecca countered swiftly. "Privacy is not a shield for dishonesty," she said. "These images and emails were discovered through legal means, and they tell the story the plaintiffs are desperate to hide." When it was Vivian's turn to testify, she stumbled through her answers, her voice wavering as Rebecca questioned her. "Mrs. Cross," Rebecca said, using Vivian's maiden name, "did you or did you not engage in an extramarital affair with Mr. Carter?" Vivian hesitated, glancing at Jake before finally muttering, "Yes." Rebecca nodded, her expression neutral. "And were the photographs presented to this court taken during the course of that affair?" "Yes," Vivian whispered, her face flushing with shame. Jake fared no better on the stand. When Rebecca asked him if he had ever denied the affair, he admitted he hadn't. "So you admit that the statements made by Mr. Cross and Ms. Davis were true?" Rebecca pressed. Jake hesitated, his face a mask of frustration and anger. "Yes," he finally said, his voice barely audible. The trial didn't last long after that. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a verdict in our favor. Jake and Vivian's lawsuit was dismissed, and they were ordered to cover our legal fees. It was a decisive victory, one that left no room for doubt. As we left the courthouse, Leah turned to me, her expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," she said softly. "Yeah," I replied, though the victory felt bittersweet. The trial had brought closure, but it also underscored the depth of the betrayal we had endured. Jake and Vivian had tried to destroy us, not just emotionally but legally, and it would take time to rebuild the parts of ourselves they had damaged. In the weeks that followed, the fallout for Jake and Vivian only grew. News of the failed lawsuit spread through their professional circles, further tarnishing their already battered reputations. Jake struggled to find work, his former colleagues unwilling to associate with someone so publicly disgraced. Vivian's photography contracts dried up, her name now synonymous with scandal. Leah and I stayed in touch, bound by the shared experience of surviving the chaos they had unleashed. We weren't the same people we had been before all this, but in a strange way, we were stronger. The truth had come out, and justice had been served. And for now, that was enough.